Hey, everybody, welcome aboard to our OutTalk series. This is John Sobek. I am your host today, and it's wonderful to have you all joining us for this amazing conversation. This is the third in our series of looking at cultural competencies in LGBTQ care. And today our conversation is going to be focusing on the AAPI community. And I'm really excited to have our guests with us today to have this conversation. A little bit about OutCare Health. OutCare Health is a 501(c) nonprofit. And the focus is to lead the charge for LGBTQ health equity worldwide. We want to empower millions of LGBTQ individuals with comprehensive resources, support, and education, as well as providing providers with the education to serve our amazing community. You know, ultimately, the vision of OutCare Health is to create a world where every LGBTQ plus person has access to quality healthcare and they feel empowered to live their healthiest and most authentic life. And once again, I'm so excited to have our panel here today and to maybe help us in that journey. And I always think it's kind of best to have our panel introduce themselves. So with that said, I'm going to have each panelist introduce themselves, tell a little bit about who they are and what they do. And they get a bonus question live on the air. They don't know this question. It's coming at them right now. So it's been a long, rough day. You're feeling kind of down and you go home and there's one movie that you can pull up that you know will make you smile and feel better. So what's that movie for each of you? And I'm going to put you on the spot, Kevin. We're going to start with you with your introduction, and then you'll have a moment to kind of still think about that movie.
Well, I'll start with the introduction part. So good afternoon, maybe early good evening, depending on where people are located. My name is Kevin Wang. I use he, him pronouns. I serve as medical director for our LGBTQIA plus program at Providence Swedish. We are a secular affiliate of a larger faith-based institution out in Seattle, Washington. I also work as a family physician, so I get to work with our family medicine residents, and I serve as faculty for one of the residency programs at Swedish First Hill Family Medicine in Seattle, Washington, and with their OBGYN residency program as well. If I had to pick a movie which would make me smile, I'm gonna maybe go away from the movie and maybe a recent streaming show I watched recently. So I'm gonna actually say two. One is The West Wing. Given everything which is happening, it still makes me feel good to see something we can all aspire to get to in the future with our current political climate. And I think this is something where many of us have seen. Ted Lasso just makes me happy and is a nice thing to kind of walk alongside a journey of someone who may be going through some difficult times. And do you want me to pass it off to somebody or?
Sure, take it, Kevin. I'm on board with it.
All right. Hopefully I do not mispronounce your name. Is it Stara or Stara?
It's Stara.
Stara, please take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. Hi, I am Stara Shakti. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Also consider myself an therapist activist. Let's see, I work a lot with trauma and intersectionality. I work with marginalized communities, especially LGBTQ and BIPOC, and also first-generation Americans, as well as neurodivergent folks. I have my own private practice in Los Angeles, and I'm excited to be here and have this conversation. And I'm an old classic favorite, so I would probably go with It's a Wonderful Life.
Nice.
Yeah, that
and
always makes me feel good.
Star's also a neighbor of mine here in Los Angeles, so it's fun to see you out here.
Cool.
Okay, Michael.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm currently a third-year medical student and also LGBTQ director of the Asian Pacific American Med Student Association. I'm also currently serving on the board of directors of the Mazzoni Center in Philadelphia, which is kind of the premier health and wellness center that caters to the local LGBTQ community here in the city, which provides gender-affirming care, whether it be hormone replacement therapy or just like behavioral health. And like we also organize like an annual trans health conference So kind of like a one-stop shop for the community's needs here in the city. And if I had to pick, I think I'm going to go with the TV route as well. But if folks haven't seen Heartstopper,
Oh my God, that's
it's
amazing.
so cute. It's
I love
honestly
that.
like, it's very like cheesy, but like it's kind of like a nice little like getaway to, you know, to forget about how tough life can be sometimes, like a little nice like escape. So
Yeah, and it somehow helps you believe in the innocence of love again.
yes, very that, like just pure, yes, very that.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of gay rom-coms.
So, hi, everybody. Once again, my name is John Sobek. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a therapist here in Pasadena, California. And I specialize in working with LGBTQ adolescents and their families during the coming out process. And I'm the proud author of a book that just came out this year, which is called Out, A Parent's Guide to Supporting Your LGBTQIA plus kid through coming out and beyond. And it's been an incredible journey bringing this book into the world. And one thing that I want to bring into our conversation today, especially, you know, as the host and a white male, is I want to make sure that in this conversation that I de-center my voice and that we create room for our panelists of people with lived experience to learn and create together to help all of us walk through this journey of understanding our community-based work. So I bring cultural humility to our conversation today, and I encourage all of you that may have questions during our conversation, you can use the Q&A function and put them in there, and bring that same sense of cultural humility or lived experience into the questions and comments that you might add to our conversation today. So with that said, I really just want to start at the beginning and really look at, you know, what is your experience of working with the Asian American Pacific Islander communities in a healthcare setting? Like, what are you seeing out there? What's working, what's not working? Where's it at for you personally right now? Kevin, I see it happening. Take it away.
I wasn't sure if you were directing it in any particular direction or anything. So it's an interesting question to answer, even though it's a pretty broad-based one at first, and it's a good place to start. You know, as someone who provides primary care services, you know, most of my initial work when I saw patients more regularly and in a residency setting, a lot of it was, you know, direct primary care services, right? And, you know, we don't necessarily advertise any particular care to a particular community, although now that's kind of changing in the roles we get to play. But interestingly, a lot of our AAPI LGBT plus family members find out really through word of mouth. And so most of my experience has been in the provision of direct primary care services. And then as our curriculum changed in our residency program, and as you know, I'm not from Seattle originally, so it took me a while to kind of get to know the community a little bit better. It provided opportunities to partner with other community-based organizations. And so there is one particular organization out in the Seattle region called Utopia, which serves LGBT AAPI communities. And so we've been able to partner with them in doing legal document update clinics, providing consultations in partnership with the primary care clinicians, doing health fairs, doing community events. And so it's really broadened our perspective in tailoring the resources we have at our healthcare system to better serve our communities, rather than trying to make any assumptions and guesses without really talking with them first. So most of the work I get to do is kind of as a direct primary care provision, but then influencing the care we can provide by making these partnerships with other groups.
Right. I mean, I'd like to kind of jump in. I feel like before medical school, you know, obviously I'm not like a fully licensed physician yet. I was very, very involved in these community organizations that I think Dr. Wang is talking about with regards to like there is an organization in Philadelphia called Philly Asian and Queer, and we kind of started in 2018, And during the pandemic, I think there was I think we were all kind of experiencing like a desire to connect and have a community, since we were all so quarantined for so long. And so a lot of my interest in catering to this specific community was to kind of find other folks who kind of looked like me, who shared both not only like coming from like an Asian background, but also the LGBT background. Because I think an experience that I often had was, I felt like I had, LGBTQ friends, but I also had Asian friends, but they weren't always seeing eye to eye. I think they were very, like, I felt like sometimes I was the only AAPI person in queer spaces, but the only queer person in Asian spaces. And it was kind of hard to kind of find that community. And that's kind of where my own like personal quest for finding people who share this mutual intersectional identity kind of stemmed from. So we did a lot of just marketing through social media, trying to create like support groups every month where folks could come and talk about topics like coming out to your family and navigating the like intricacies of being, wanting to be a good son, having Asian values in that sense, but also wanting to be, my own person and like coming out and like owning that part of my identity. So I think that's where my interest and experience kind of started. And now I also help out my friend who owns a private practice. He's also like a therapist, where in Philly, it's really hard to find a therapist who is Asian, let alone LGBTQ. So, he started his own private practice where it is a lot of Asian therapists catering to the AANHPI communities, because, I think there's just, having a therapist who understands your cultural background, and it can make a huge difference. So that's kind of the capacity that I'm also serving on. And also, obviously, as part of the Asian Pacific American Med Student Association, trying to find and connect other med students who come have this identity and kind of building a community for like mentorship and such. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I love the conversation so far. I first started working with this community, people at the intersections of AAPI and LGBTQ when I was a trainee at Antioch University Counseling Center, and they have a program called Colors, which offers free LGBTQ or free counseling to LGBTQ youth under 25. And I that was my first experience in working with Asian queer people, and a lot of the issues that they were facing had to do with like identity development, and similar to what you guys have talked about with coming out, whether to come out or not. Like, it's such a tricky question with AAPI LGBTQ youth, and also the real like stigma in the communities and in Asian communities, especially around being gay, around going to therapy, around all of these things. And not let's see, a lot of the issues are anxiety, depression, PTSD. There's also a lot of internalized homophobia, self-harm, suicidality, all of those kind of things. And at the later end of my training, now that I'm in private practice, actually, I have a lot of clients who find me through Psychology Today. I have a profile page on there, and I specifically spell out, the intersectional identities that I work with. And so people find me that way. And when they get to me, I especially work with a lot of like queer Asian female clients. And when they get to me, they're like, I have been looking so long for somebody like you. And go to what Michael was talking about, like somebody who looks like them and who they can relate to, and it's really important. It's really important to them. So, and same for me. When I choose a healthcare provider, or even therapist, or any healthcare provider, I want somebody who looks like me, if possible. It just feels safer and more comfortable.
And one thing that I heard all three of you mention that I think would be really important to share with, our listeners today is this idea of being LGBTQ in the Asian community. Either sharing from personal stories or things you understand from the community itself that maybe make it a different challenge than for people in other communities come out. And I wonder if you'd be willing to share either some personal experiences or knowledge that you have based on that. Michael?
Sure. I think, I think a lot of us have heard of like the model minority myth, for example, and I think it sometimes, at least for me, it can get compounded with the sense of like having to prove myself. I think there is an element of like, feeling like, I think there's an element of like I think my parents, for example, always had very high expectations. I think that's kind of the like traditional Asian parenting, especially like if they're immigrants, they want what's best for you. And I think for me, being gay was one part of my identity, but I felt like I always had to kind of try and win the approval of my parents. And I think this is kind of a common theme that sometimes occurs, the sense of like, if I study hard, if I do well in school, then like my parents, I felt like even if I was gay, like at least, I'm like making them proud in other ways, and I think also maybe it's an immigrant thing too. Like I think for me, my parents immigrated here from like the post Vietnam War, and I think there's an element of just our parents have done so much for me that it feels almost selfish. It's this constant turmoil between a sense of indebtitude to my parents for sacrificing, for immigrating, dropping everything they knew to create a better life for me, but then also knowing that deep down inside, they don't agree with me being LGBTQ, and kind of having to reconcile those two beliefs of, feeling like I want to make my parents proud, but at the same time knowing that it's hard to make them proud, knowing that they just don't understand. There's just not the words or the language isn't there. I think that's another thing, language barriers, and trying to communicate with like older generations who where my parents primarily speak Vietnamese, and trying to explain like what is being LGBTQ to them, a language that they don't know the vocabulary for can make it a little challenging. And I think that also extends to LGBTQ folks who weren't born in America, immigrated to America, who are LGBTQ, and also are Asian, and have another layer of barriers, so to speak, to healthcare. So
I can definitely relate to so much of that. And I didn't come out for a long time to my parents because of that. A long time. So it is it's very challenging. Let me see. Let's see, I had a thought and I'm trying to remember what it is now.
So let me have you on. What do you think was one of those challenging moments with your parents of sharing this identity?
Come back to me, actually.
Okay. Kevin?
Kevin, you go.
I don't know if I necessarily have anything else to add. I'm just going to say yes to both what Stara and Michael both said, because I think it resonates with a lot of us. And I think for us in the healthcare profession, what I think makes it really difficult, particularly when it comes to the coming out period or being able to relate to people's stories, is one of the biggest I don't know, fallacies of if that's the word I'm looking for, but one of the parts which is most complex is, you know, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian. We're not a homogenous group. And so the experience Michael has is going to be similar, but different than what Star had, which is going to be different, yet similar in what I have. And then we also have to take into consideration the number, you know, if you look at population demographics. So the Williams Institute has a bunch of this information, which is really great. And, you know, there were, I think it was 6 in 10 Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders are immigrants, and which is a pretty big chunk of our community. And, you know, one of the biggest things is Western culture influencing, you know, us, you know, our generation of LGBTQI plus people, you know, our family members and so forth. And so there's so many layered complexities to it. And then there's the cultural context, which I think everything Michael said is something which we really all feel, which is, well, Kevin, who's going to carry on the family name? And you're the only boy. And oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And family embarrassment. To this day, my family, you know, my immediate family knows, but no one else in my extended family, well, I don't, technically they don't know. I'm pretty sure they may suspect. Family, you know, our close family friends don't know as well. So it's super complex. And I'm not saying we're any more complex than any other immigrant, BIPOC, LGBT plus community, but it is something which I see on a regular basis, particularly with my adolescent patients, and even actually some of my older patients who came to see me because they heard from some of the people they've met, and some of them didn't share with me their identity until about 2 years in. And even every annual exam, I asked them, hey, let's talk about sex and all this other stuff. And it wasn't until they felt they knew they could tell me and to say, hey, now I feel comfortable telling you, can you prescribe me PrEP? Yes, right, that kind of thing. So long story short, it's complex, it's nuanced, but it's something where hopefully one of these days, you know, more and more people's stories will be out there, and more of our healthcare profession will have our community members who are serving our communities to be able to better understand and provide the cultural context to make a setting where people can feel comfortable sharing these stories with us.
I remembered what I wanted to say. I felt for a long time like being caught between two worlds. And this is a common theme that, yeah, both nodding already, that I found in my patients too. It's like when you're in the Asian community, like it's like gay people don't exist, really. It's like, I remember my parents saying, I don't know if they said it, but the idea is like there that, well, we don't have gay people in our community, right? They're invisible, you know, and it's like we don't exist, you know, and so there's a lot of invisibility. And then in the LGBTQ community also, like it's not perfect, you know, I mean, there's still, you know, with ignorance and racism and, you know, microaggressions and, you know, this kind of things that happen. Yeah, so that I wanted to comment on that there's old world, new world with the parent immigrant generation, and then the really usually US born and raised or came here when they were young and raised here. And it's a collectivistic also and individualistic. They're like different poles. One is the pull towards the togetherness of the family and community. And then the other one is this pull towards individuality and self-expression. And, you know, so it's just really different, almost like polar opposites, just really pulling you in different directions. So, yeah,
You know,
weird.
John, if I may, and I don't know if this is just, well, probably the elephant in the room, but I think we all know it too. I think there's also a component of colonization, which happened particularly with our Native Hawaiian communities, with the Mapu tribe, which I don't know if people have seen there's a documentary about Mahu, which is sort of their equivalent, and I'm not saying it's the best name, but it's their version of, you know, two-spirit communities. Same thing with people who are from American Samoa and Fiji, and how at least in Hawaii, the Mahu tribe is now one of the most discriminated against communities, despite the fact prior to colonization, right, they were seen as holders of tradition and culture and leaders within their communities. And so it's it's complex, long story short.
Yeah, and I think all the things you're addressing are showing the complexities of, healthcare providers serving the Asian American communities. I want to just give us space again for all those of you listening with us live to know that you can, if you have any questions or experiences you'd like to share, you can put them in the Q&A, and then we can bring those up for our panelists. But looking at this idea, like we've looked at some of the challenges of what's showing up, what do you think healthcare institutions, clinicians, clinics, treatment centers, schools can do, like specific steps they might be able to address to kind of break down some of those barriers and make this different going forward? What are some of the things you think organizations could take? I'll come back to you.
I'll start then.
Okay.
On this one, definitely more education on both of the different communities with within higher institutions of higher learning. More understanding of the intersectionality of kind of bringing these two kind of very different worlds together. So I guess more education, more training, more multi-cultural competency training. And we need more representation. We need more people like us entering into these graduate programs and, things like that. So I think maybe there could be some, I don't know, scholarships, grants, like, specifically addressing AAPI LGBTQ people who are trying to, go up into positions of leadership. We need more visibility, and then, yeah.
I mean, yes to everything Stara just said. Working for a large healthcare institution, having gone through medical school, through residency, having been a patient, I think before we can start to figure out what we can do better, I think we also have to first recognize we caused a lot of harm in the first place. And I think if we don't start there first, I don't think we're ever really going to be able to move forward and to take next steps. And certainly isn't just limited to to our community when it comes to the harm healthcare institutions have caused. I mean, there are countless other populations of people where we just have to recognize we did something wrong. I think a second thing we need to start shifting our perspective is thinking we know what communities need. One of the worst things we can do is, or what is it they say? Some of the worst things which we can do are based upon our best intentions. And when we start thinking, well, I think this is what a community needs, turns out it's not even on their list of priorities. And so I think the second thing we need to recognize is we don't know everything, certainly not. And we need to build partnerships with our communities to figure out how can we utilize the resources we have at our disposal to serve you and to serve other communities who need us the most. And then also recognizing too, we may not be the answer, right? Community-based organizations have been doing this work time and time again and have had to put Band-Aids on the wounds we have caused. And so sometimes it's just stepping back and letting those who have been doing the grassroots work do their job and stop getting in their way, right? And then everything else Stara just said, which is, I hate online training modules, but I know it's what we have available. But then the next step, the next question to then ask is, with the training, how do we keep ourselves accountable? So finding an accountability partner to, for example, as Stara mentioned, what can we do to increase representation in our workforce, right? In leadership, in the direct healthcare provision, indirect healthcare provision? How do we look at who we hire to do this, or I don't know, printing stuff for our hospital, right? Like let's not just go to the big, majority culture or companies, but what can we do to go to some local LGBT plus communities to bring them into the fold and say, oh my gosh, these are things we can all do together. So again, it's a complex response to what seems to be an easy answer. But those are just kind of the things I have in the back of my mind. And it starts from every layer, from, where we end up in our healthcare profession and career, all the way down to how are we educating our elementary students, right? How are we educating medical students, nursing students, nurse midwives, nurse practitioners, everybody. So I'm going to stop there because I think I just talked too much.
No, Kevin, I'm so glad you brought the harm piece up, because I want to throw out a phrase that I think a lot of people don't know. You guys might know because you're in the medical kind of field. Iatrogenic harm is what you're referring to. Yeah, it came from the medical profession, but it's now in other fields like mental health therapy. So iatrogenic harm is like the harm that is done within a helping professional setting by somebody who is supposed to be, the Hippocratic Oath, right? Like don't do any harm, right? And sometimes just through ignorance, not, or through lack of cultural competency training, lack of education, on different cultural communities, sometimes without intending to, people from the dominant white, majority kind of, can unintentionally cause harm. The intent is not there, but the impact is what's more important, right? And yeah, so iatrogenic harm. Oh, and I've had clients, so many clients come to me, telling me, oh, like not only how hard it was for them to find me, but also like the negative experiences they had with past white therapists, so many. They're like, this therapist of mine said this, or that therapist did that. And I'm just like, wow, these are some horrible things that actually are being said and done. So it's on a continuum from like kind of awkward and uncomfortable, to flat out racist, or homophobic or whatever. So it's something that I think we all need to be educated more about, that when we go to somebody in a, who's supposed to be helping, but they're actually harming. I've had to educate a lot of my patients, my clients about it, because some of them just thought, oh, well, maybe what she said about me is true, and I'm like, no, she shouldn't have said that, So I really try to teach people about iatrogenic harm. So I'm glad you put it up. It's just trauma. It can be very traumatic for queer Asian people to experience some of that. So more education, more training. We need it, and we need more visibility and more of us in positions of leadership. Professors and grad schools, and we just need more people who are like us, so that our clients can find us, our patients, and also, to inspire younger people to go into these fields,
And Michael, you're right in the middle of it right now. So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo everything that has already been said by Kevin and Stara. I think the visibility piece is a huge one. I think especially in like AANHPI communities, especially if we are going to take like LGBTQ out of it, I think there's just a huge visibility component. I think a lot of strides have been made. I think unfortunately, due to COVID kind of starting in, say, Wuhan, China, and there have been more discussions about it, but before that, I think there wasn't really a dialogue or a space or platform for Asians to really kind of speak out or have their voice be heard on, or have a seat at the table, because it felt like we were such a small minority of the population. And I think with a lot of recent advancements in, say, like in media, with Oscar, everything everywhere all at once, or just more representation in like Disney movies, it feels like we're kind of seen. And I think that visibility piece is so huge, because I think it kind of penetrates the psyche of America in a sense. We're not just, we do exist, and we have culture, and we have things to offer. And I think, at least for me, and I obviously can't speak on behalf of all Asians, because what Kevin said earlier, each person is unique. And even though there are thematic similarities, you can't generalize. But I think for me, I feel like I grew up kind of rejecting a little bit of my like Asian heritage to kind of fit in, and wanting to feel like, oh, like I'm just like everyone else, I don't want to be known as the kid who like brings weird food to lunch, at school, or, whose parents speaks a weird language, or, you know what I mean? And I think for me, I think I like to think that the world is becoming more accepting of things that are Asian, and not exoticizing, our culture, our foods, our, what we have to offer. And I think that piece is really big. So I think just increasing visibility, on boards, in leadership positions, I think, it also applies to the LGBTQ community to see, CEOs, or, people in leadership positions, or even in media, who are queer, like Heartstopper, like it just creates this element of like, hey, like it's normalized. It's not like such a weird thing, and normalizing that our experiences, I think can go a long way, I guess.
And I want to take this to something really specific. One of our listeners, Ramona, put in a question. I'm a straight African-American cis woman psychiatrist who works in AIDS and HIV clinic. They have immigrants from many places in the world. It's really impossible to know about each culture. What thoughts do you have about questions that they should be asking patients to better understand their experience of being part of this community? Especially addressing many of the assaults on the community right now. I mean, we're looking at, almost a 300% rise in Asian American hate crimes. We're seeing an almost 400% rise in LGBTQ hate crimes. What are the main issues she wants to know that maybe she should be bringing right to the forefront of these conversations? Some real specific things you think might be good to bring into that patient provider relationship.
Well, I'll get started, and hopefully Stara and Michael will fill in the large gaps, I'm sure, which will be in my response. I'm gonna start off with it's a hard question to answer. I'm just gonna be honest with you, because just the same as people who are Black, it's not as if every Black person in the United States is from Africa, right? And so it's such a heterogeneous population, at least when it comes to our Asian American family members. And so if at all possible, right, rather than placing the burden on the patient I'm going to ask some questions, please teach me, right? Certainly there will be, I'm going to just use those of us are more than happy to chat with people for all of us to get better understandings. But if at all possible, whatever work you can do to do some review beforehand would be great, just to be able to go in with, to have sort of your toolbox to know what sort of tools you need to go into the visit with in order to provide support for your patients, right? The other thing, and maybe this ties back to the whole thing of Ted Lasso it's something I watch to help me get through the day. one of the quotes which I have actually taped on the wall in my office, and at my office today, is be curious and not judgmental. Too often questions we ask, particularly for patients who may already feel uncomfortable in a healthcare setting, are often felt judged. I can tell you as a healthcare clinic, or I don't want to speak for Star or Michael, but sometimes when we see a situation, we may end up saying, well, why didn't you take your medication every day, right? And it's not because I want to punish the person who's in front of me. It's, it comes out of a source of anxiety of, oh my gosh, what have I been missing? And to ask questions and to inquire about somebody's journey in a way which, shows them you are curious in a way to help walk alongside them in their journeys, and not to be a place, it's not a place of judgment. And so a lot of the time, some of the questions of, well, why do you think this is happening? Or what do you think is going on? Really getting their perspective, I think, can be really helpful, because one, it affirms the experiences they're having. Two, it also kind of opens the door for them to see you are interested in hearing what they have to say, and to be hearing their experiences, even if we can't relate, right? I'm a cisgender, gay Asian, gay Chinese male. There are so many other communities I can't relate to, but I can hear and I can empathize, and I can learn from the stories from my patients to provide better care to them. So I don't think there's any specific question to ask, but I think it's more of a general environment we can provide patients to help them feel heard and supported.
I definitely have some things to say about this one.
Oh, thank goodness.
One is, it's not perfect, but this book, Ethnicity and Family Therapy, this just happens to be like one that I've come across. It has chapters on many different cultural groups, and within like Asian, there are different, the different Asian cultural groups, and it's not just Asian. It's like it's like African, Latino, Middle Eastern, Asian, Indian, Pakistani. It's also European, Jewish, etc. And I think it's a good place to start sometimes, because there's a lot of information, just general information about the specific cultural group that you're working with. It doesn't have everybody in there, but it's a good place to start, I think. I found it really helpful when working with clients who are from a very different cultural background, for me to kind of like read up a little bit and have some knowledge, and then of course asking them about like their family's immigration story, I think, is a huge thing to ask about. Like, when did your parents come over here, especially if they're recent immigrants, and what was that like? And if the client was young when they came over, how old were you? What was that like for you? Like all of this, because regarding immigration to the US, there can be a lot of trauma along the way, like a lot of trauma. Just trust me on that. I'm a trauma specialist. And the other thing is on your intake form, when you are first starting to work with a patient or a client, I created my own therapy intake form, and it asks a lot of questions, like about this race, ethnicity, and cultural background, but also like, in addition to sexual orientation, there's gender identity, gender expression, pronouns, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different questions you can create, like what are the things you want to know about your patients or your clients, and come up with something to give to them, and then also other additional questions to ask them about where they're coming from. I think having it on the form, I've had clients say, just the fact that you had these things on your intake form makes me feel really seen and welcomed, and for all of who I am. I'm a trauma specialist, and I work a lot with intersectionality. So I really believe that like it's important to ask questions about all different aspects of a person's identity. Right now, we're talking about AAPI and LGBTQ in that intersection, but there's so many other possible intersections too. It could be, someone's from not a not traditional religion, like not the Abrahamic religions, and national origin, immigration status. I worked with some queer female Asian clients who were undocumented, and that's really a whole other level of knowing a person. Like, sometimes work options were very limited, for this particular client I'm thinking about, and she had to do a lot of under the table work, and there's just so much to a person. And I'm really holistic in my view and my approach. So I really believe in asking like lots of questions. So we're learning about the whole person, not just this identity or that identity, but like all of the identities, like seeing a person in their fullness. So yeah, let me get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, I
Just hang on
completely
that one.
agree with everything that's been said. I think the language piece is big. I think being able to have the patient communicate if they are immigrants and don't feel, like English is something that they're confident in, having interpreters, accessible where
Yes,
they can kind of communicate just to make sure that nothing's getting lost in translation, so to speak. And I think, I think maintaining curiosity, with any patient, you never know what a person's going through, and just keeping an open mind. And if you do, keeping your assumptions, biases in check, of course, but we all have them. If you make a mistake, apologize and move forward. I think making sure that it's about the patient as opposed to making it about you trying to inquire, if that makes sense. And keeping the focus of the care that you give on, the patient's needs, as opposed to like, oh, I need to get this right. I kind of agree in that, like, there isn't specific questions, that it's not a one size, each patient, if the patient is Vietnamese, ask about the war, you know what I mean? It really is kind of just being curious, like, what's going on, like, what's bothering you, and then kind of letting the patient guide the conversation. And sometimes it takes time to open up. I think sometimes it's hard, especially if you're an immigrant, if you have experienced trauma. It takes a few sessions to kind of build that rapport. And I know, like, for me and my parents, like, talking about feelings isn't something that they are very good at doing. And so I think just trying to kind of ask open-ended questions and letting them guide the conversation is kind of is key.
Thank you all so much. We're kind of getting towards the end of our time, so I want to ask a question about, do you have any specific existing networks or organizations that you think are out there in the community doing amazing work that you would like to share with our audience today? Things that you're like, yes, this is an organization, you turn to them, it's amazing, it's trustworthy, and they are doing the work. So any places that you might suggest, maybe say them online, but also you can type them into the chat box if you have a website available. So sorry, I saw your hand go up.
I definitely want to recommend for queer youth under 25, Colors Youth Counseling Center through Antioch University Counseling Center. But this program is called Colors, and it's free counseling for LGBTQ youth under 25, and especially for Asian youth. Like, it's really an amazing thing to offer free counseling, because then they don't have that burden of like, thank you. Yeah, they don't have the burden of having to ask their parents for money. Like, so definitely recommend Colors. As a former Colors therapist, it's like near and dear to my heart. So I want to throw that out there.
And if I could add just one caveat to that, it is a California-based organization.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
So there are some limitations to where they might be able to serve nationally, but they might be a place you could reach out to or for resources in your local area as well.
I'm sure. Yeah. That's fine.
For me, I think the first organization that comes to mind is this group called NCAPIA. I don't know if anyone else has ever heard of it, but it's like the National Queer Asian Pacific
Oh,
Military
yeah.
American. It's like a community LGBTQ. It's a nationwide LGBTQ Asian AANHPI like organization where they kind of partner with a lot of smaller organizations like Philly Asian and Queer in Philly, but a lot of like they have a lot of like small groups throughout the country. But they have great resources for translating like LGBTQ in different languages, whether it be Chinese, Hindi, Korean, to make things a little bit easier
Wow.
for folks who yes, yeah,
Amazing.
and also just like support groups for folks or like queer or parents who are trying to understand LGBTQ youth. There's a lot of great resources.
P flag.
Yes,
Yeah, like P flag. Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's kind of the resource that comes to mind. There's also I think this is probably Philly specific, but my friend's organization is called Mango Tree Counseling and Consulting. It's like a
Love it.
by Asians for Asians therapy. But just because it exists here locally doesn't mean it's not something that could be brought elsewhere. So yeah, those are kind of the two things that come to mind.
Another one that's not LGBT specific, but Asian American Pacific Islander specific is Yellow Collective, I think it's called. Yellow Chair Collective. Sorry. Yes. There's a lot of Asian support groups like through that, especially with other intersecting identities like being neurodivergent, having ADHD and things like that. But so it's very, yeah, it's a really cool group.
And Kevin?
So the one I showed my dad, because I thought it was very helpful, was the Asian Pride Project. And I think they share a lot of stories about the coming out process. And so that was, I think that was really helpful for my dad. And then one I just found out about is called the Prism Project. Shoot. I know I think I'm getting the name wrong, but I do know it's a Prism Foundation. It's a foundation which helps to support Asian Pacific Islander LGBTQI plus communities. So those are the two I heard of the most recently. So would be great for people to check it out.
I got
And
one
just
more
so
to
you
add.
know, all in the background, Chris has been putting all of these websites into the chat, so he's sharing all that information. So it will be out there. But Star, I actually need to bring us to a close. Okay, go quick.
Okay. Just for California, Satrong is, and I'll put it in the chat. It's for South Asian Americans. That's it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's really powerful. So one last question, and this is, we like to conclude every session with this, and it is like, take a moment, take a breath, and maybe envision for you, what is your hope or vision for the future of AAPI LGBTQ care going forward? Like in the most perfect world going forward, what would your vision be? What would you like to see happen and change in the world?
I'd be out of a job where I wouldn't have to be a medical director for LGBTQI plus services and having to tailor any specific protocols or processes for our patients and communities would be amazing.
I would like the ideas of intersectionality and iatrogenic harm in particular to get a lot more traction, for people to know more about what they are and how they impact, these kind of groups that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think, I kind of also think on the same veins as what has already been said, just more normalization of, when you turn on the TV, when you go into Netflix, you kind of have diversity. Queerness isn't like such a, everything that pertains to the gay community isn't about HIV or, like it's just normal stories with normal plots with folks who are just that reflect the diversity of our country, you know? I think that's, yeah, it would be nice to wake up and not have to think about like, oh, like being queer, that is going to, like, that's something that I have to worry about at work or worry about in school, or, you know, when I watch, you know, like, oh, when I'm in an environment, I'm the only person who looks like me. Everyone else looks different, you know. So I think just more diversity in all avenues of life would be wonderful. So.
Amen to that, absolutely. So I'm
I
going to bring
just-
it to a close for today. I want to thank you all so much for giving your time and your energy. And for all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. And the webinar will be posted probably by next week on the OutCare website, so you can go and look at it again and catch up on any information you may have missed. A couple of announcements, some cool stuff going out here. OutCare Health is actually looking for some dedicated leaders who are passionate about LGBTQ health equity to join the board for the 2024 and 26 cycle. Applications are due the 1st of December, and you can visit outcarehealth.org/board to learn more about what's involved and maybe to start an application. Also, if you are interested in LGBTQ health trainings and in need of CEUs, OutCare is an on-demand training center. They offer credits now, and we know we always need those credits. So medical students and residents can access the curriculum for free to train for the next generation to providing LGBTQ care. You can find more about that at outcarehealth.org/training. And don't forget, join us next month. Our next OutTalk is Gender Affirmation, a Social and Medical Lens. It's going to be on November 16th, same bat time, same bat channel. And you can find more about that at outcarehealth.org/outtalk. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, I really want to thank all of you for sharing for your lived experience, your wisdom, and just the joy of who you are as people. It's been an honor to sit with you today. Thank you so much. And Kevin, you have to teach me how that works. I don't understand. You do this, and then your screen like hearts up.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for hosting this too.
Take care, y'all. Be well.
I love it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.